Today I'm going to talk to you guys about, why innovation fails. So to do that, I just wanted to start off with a quote here from Doerr, who's a famous venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. And he says, "Ideas are easy, execution is everything. It takes a team to win." And I think this really encapsulates something that a lot of people forget about innovation. A lot of people think that innovation is about the ideas and coming up with those ideas, and at the start it's all exciting and fun. But then actually when it gets to the nitty gritty, innovation is really made in the trenches when you're executing, when you're trying to scale that. And so what I want to do today is I want to sort of talk a little bit about why innovation might fail, in the execution phase or the scaling phase. And to do that, I'm going to tell you a bit of a story. So I want you to cast your minds back to the year 2004. Usher's Year was rocketing up the charts in a Harvard dormitory. Mark Zuckerberg was coding what would become known as the Facebook. And another company, which is now one of the world's most valuable companies, was making waves by cancelling late fees on movie rentals and moving into online streaming. Well, Netflix wasn't the only ones doing this. Yes, Blockbuster was as well. Interesting. So the reason that I like this narrative and why I love this story is because when people think about the failure of companies like a Blockbuster, like a Kodak, often the story is given that these companies didn't see the innovation coming, or they just weren't quick enough to innovate. And actually, when you start digging into some of these stories, typically these companies actually are more ahead of the curve than you think they are. So Blockbuster in 2004, they cancelled late fees and they were investing $200 million into their online streaming platform. But then what happened? Well, for those of you who don't know, spoiler alert, basically this: Netflix would go on to become one of the world's most valuable companies, whereas Blockbuster would go into bankruptcy not that long afterwards. So, I really want to challenge this narrative of, it's not just about the ideas and why, it's really about the execution. So Blockbuster and Netflix really, in many ways, had, were operating on the same premise or the same ideas. But one really executed outstandingly, and now brings us amazing content like Squid Games. And the other one, is now just sort of resigned to the dustbins of history. And really, there's a million and one reasons why an innovation can fail to scale. But today, in the context of this story, I want to talk about just three. So the first is misalignment between innovation and the broader organization. Now, in the case of Blockbuster, the CEO had a very clear vision. He had a very clear strategy. He was going after the market moves that he thought were the best. Unfortunately, there wasn't sort of alignment behind this vision and behind this strategy amongst the rest of the board or even other parts of the company. And what this actually led to was an activist shareholder, Kalisch, coming in, taking over some board seats, and then really making life difficult for the CEO. And that was really the start of Blockbuster's quite rapid decline. The next problem that Blockbuster had is that they really didn't have a plan at the innovation portfolio level. And so your innovation portfolio can be thought of kind of like a financial portfolio. You want to think about how you spread your risk amongst different bets and, apportion, different funding amounts to different assets. The idea is that you spread your risk, you diversify, and, you work on some things which are incremental improvements, and you put a little bit of money in the disruptive bets that are going to, really change your business in the future. The thing is if you don't have a lined up plan, if you're just randomly sort of throwing money at different things, typically this doesn't work out well. And this is one of the key things that I've seen, organizations, both large and small, make this mistake all the time. Finally, there was a lack of common incentives here. And I think if you've got stakeholders, customers, shareholders, the board, the employees, all operating under the same set of incentives, or being able to align the incentives between all those groups, then it just makes your hockey stick growth so much easier. And so in this case, I think the biggest example of this was in the late fees. So Blockbuster cancelled late fees in 2004. The problem here is that late fees were a massive, massive revenue generator for them. So this caused issues. It meant that execs on the board, weren't getting bonuses because their revenue had dropped, and this caused a lot of consternation. And really, in the end, what happened is after the CEO left and a new CEO was appointed, they then reintroduced late fees. And after that, you really saw the crash of Blockbuster's sort of share price and their crash as a company. But really what the problem was there was that there was misaligned incentives between the customers who did not want late fees and, this company and the execs who were, making really great revenue off those late fees. So let's just bring it back to our work at ThinkPlace for a moment. So what does all this mean for our work in complex systems? Well, every day at ThinkPlace, we are building new services, we're innovating, we're helping our clients do change and really, not just our clients, but then they're operating within these broad, really complex ecosystems. And I think there's some really key lessons here. So the first thing I want you to do is when you're designing to change the status quo, really consider, is there alignment with the organization strategy? So is the change you're implementing aligned to the strategy of the organization, the broader picture? And then, speaking to that as well, how does the change fit into the ecosystem? If you can align those two things, you're going to have a much easier time in getting something to scale and have impact. And then finally, what other incentives are there that are present in the ecosystem or within the organization that you can leverage to then try and increase impact? And doing that will just make it a lot easier to scale.